Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, how are my snipers doing today? I hope you guys are doing fantastic. Listen, today we're talking about the one, the only special Mr. Turbo Toad token. Now, we are going to jump into Coinfessions right now, ladies and gentlemen. Before we dive into the analysis, we can see my ex was abusive, sorry. I hid cash under the mattress trying to escape. In 2020, I bought BTC with it for $12,000. My secret, really happy I didn't keep it as cash. My ex will never know. Now I'm free, and that's priceless. So no one likes an abusive partner. Let's just say that. Shout out to you for making it out. Shout out to you for making the right financial decision. And, I'm sorry to the people that have gone through, abusive partners and parents and even friends. I mean, that just sucks, right? I really wish the world was a better place. I really wish people were just better. But I mean, just that's just unfortunately how it is sometimes. So it's good that you made it out. It's good that you turned that 12,000 into a good amount, right? Especially if you did buy in 2020, you're probably up a nice six figures or so, more or less. And yeah, I hope your life turns out great. I hope your life turns out great. And the person that's abusive, well, I hope they get a lesson, or God will show them, because it's just not right. It's just not right to be an abusive partner and just abusive person to other people. Listen, now on to some other news. We can see, ladies and gentlemen, that I did post on the 31st of May, this post right over here, posting this turbo meme now during the dip, because that's how confident I am in the Toad. And we can see our beloved Toad absolutely smashing the bear, right? Absolutely smashing the bear. We can see it got 1,000 views, 78 likes, a decent amount of replies, people being supportive. And ladies and gentlemen, the 31st, right, before we jump into the basics, the 31st was somewhere around here. This was after Turbo has gone down, or went down, sorry, a good amount, right? It went down at one point roughly almost 30%. But I was confident in Turbo, right? I was confident in Turbo. So, although we did have moments where we did go a little bit lower, I'm still confident. Like, I understand that it might seem delusional, but ladies and gentlemen, you have to realize, like, everything is still on track when it comes to Turbo. It's just this whole cycle is taking much longer than it did previous times. However, it doesn't mean we're still not going on track. That's the thing, right? When I look at these other charts, like where Bitcoin's at, where Bitcoin dominance at, altcoin dominance, and I look at other charts as well, it's like we are on track, people. We're still on track. It's just taking much longer, and it's going to be, I know it's very, very annoying. It's very frustrating. We all wish we can just get in 3 months later, the big rally happens, we all cash out. I understand. It's very, very frustrating. But ladies and gentlemen, that's just not how the world works. And the thing is, people, we have to realize is, the reason why this cycle is taking longer than previous cycles is because there's more money involved. Okay, when there's more money involved, the cycles simply take longer. Okay, it's just the truth. Okay, it is just the truth, because in order to move the amount of money that's going to be in crypto, and the amount of money that's going to evolve over time, it takes more time. Okay, because just even think about it from a logical standpoint. A lot of us can lift up a couple of pounds. A lot of us can lift up 20, 30 pounds. But something like 70 pounds, 100 pounds, 150, 200, eventually when it starts getting scaling, it takes longer. You can't just rush into it. You need to build up your strength. And just think about it that way, that the markets are just going to the gym right now, and they are ultimately preparing to be part of the heavyweight, right? To lift heavy, to win a championship, right? Those people that lift like a ton, right? That's what ultimately the markets are preparing to do. They're in training mode. And I know it's very, very frustrating, people, but you have to realize that, good things, it takes patience. It takes patience. Because at the end of the day, right, after all of this, as long as you cash out, you're going to say, you know what, it was worth it. And me too. That's the way I view it too, because whatever you make this cycle, whether it's a 3x, a 5x, a 10x, 20, 50, 100, hopefully all of us, hitting up closer to that 50 to 100x, then ladies and gentlemen, the wait is always going to be worth it, especially that we don't 100% know that how next cycle is going to be. Okay, because next cycle there still could be a lot of opportunities, but they can start regulating stuff. And then the cycle after that, 10, 15 years down the road, I mean, who knows? Who knows at that point, right? So this very may well be the last ultimate real cycle that does enormous numbers. Now I know people don't believe it because we're down right now, but ladies and gentlemen, right, when we look at the data, everything is still on track. Speaking about data, speaking about other things, look, ladies and gentlemen, we are still respecting this huge support. Now, ultimately, that is going to be the most important thing over the next coming, let's just say days and few short weeks, is that we never break this. And what I mean by it is like we could temporarily go down. We could even sweep technically. I mean, this is not ideal, of course, but we could technically sweep 0.0029. But as long as we're pretty much closing above 0.0033, I'm like, that's the lowest I want to start closing. Okay, that's the lowest I want to start closing, because then, of course, at a certain point, it does become a little concerning. Now, if we go to, something like the monthly, of course, it doesn't look the healthiest, right? We are still technically creating higher lows in terms of the bottoms. Now, if we go to something like the weeklies, ladies and gentlemen, and we remove all of the noise, we can see that, yes, we are consistently, creating lower highs. We have this high over here. We have this high over here. We have this high over here, right? And you can just see, right, that it is getting lower and lower. But we also have these key bottoms, right? The swing bottoms. We have one over here, one over here. And I really just like practically where this green box is, I don't really want to close below there. Okay, I really, really don't. But you can see we are getting squished, right? We could even have a week where we kind of go up here. And ultimately, that still doesn't really change anything yet, because all we would do is just create a lower high once again. And then most likely we would go down again, probably close where we are at the green box. And then at that point, somewhere mid-September, mid to late September, we're going to have to start deciding. We really, really are. And we can see, ladies and gentlemen, the last few weeks before Turbo really started to rally, it was quite messy, right? It was quite messy. In fact, structure technically broke at one point, right? Technically, structure did break. We had this low over here, this higher low. Boom, we closed down here, taking out these two lows. Possible shift in momentum. We had 2 weeks of weak buying pressure. So, it was very tricky price action, right? This is why, as a trader, you can't always be right. As a trader, you can't always be right, because we can see there were actually 2 weeks of great rejections, right? We can see this weekly candle was really weak. And then, boom, mid-September, we get hit with an absolute cannon of a weekly candle. So that's what I'm saying, people. The markets are going to be tricky. The markets are not going to be as obvious sometimes as people want them to be. Even for traders, sometimes you look at a pair and you're like, I don't know what the hell's happening. And you just don't trade it, right? You let it unfold. And then when you see an easier opportunity, that's when you take trades. So that's a whole nother thing for trading, but it still applies to something like these markets. Sometimes the markets can get very, very tricky. But ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, right, we can see before we close off the video, like we see how we're getting these slower highs here consistently. If we go down here, the same thing was always happening, right? We were printing lower and lower and lower highs. And then eventually, we had to make a choice. We broke up, but here again, lower, 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 right? Then we went sideways for a little bit, then we broke up, and then we really shot up. So the time is running out. The time is running out. Turbo has to make a choice sooner than later, but it still probably has a few weeks in it. That is ultimately it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys did enjoy, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Goodbye.